Bring a Trailer podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bring a Trailer podcast. Alex Porter here. Very excited to be joined by Jeff Mason, President and COO of the Piston Foundation, a regular charity partner of Bring a Trailers. We've been excited to work with them over the years. They are a nonprofit organization that helps young folks build careers in the collector car industry, so something very near and dear to our hearts. Jeff, welcome, and thanks for being here.
Thanks, Alex. It's great to be here with you.
We have a lot to talk about. We got a lot of history with the Piston Foundation. We love the Piston Foundation. We have some exciting stuff coming up with the Piston Foundation. But before we dive in, I'd love to talk about you and your background because you're a super legit car guy. But maybe up at the top, you can just give us the primer on the Piston Foundation before we dive into you, the man, Jeff.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that. So the Piston Foundation is pretty simple to understand. We are a nonprofit public charity that works for the car community, and we help young people start careers as collector car technicians. So we help them in a couple of ways. We support education through tech school scholarships, and that allows interested young car enthusiasts to start pursuing this career by attending a school of their choice. There are actually 630 some odd schools in the United States that have an accredited auto tech program.
Wow.
And if you're interested in classic cars and collector cars, they really can go anywhere to get that basic education. So it could be a community school. It could be, a 4-year school like McPherson College. So we do that piece, and that's the start of it. And then the next piece is helping them connect with job opportunities, getting those kids that are graduating out of those programs connected with shops so that they can really begin their career then. We all know that it takes a few years to go from, that academic or even that lab knowledge to the real world. So that job opportunity piece is critical. And ultimately, we are supporting kids who have that interest, and we support the person, not the program. Many people ask, hey, what schools do you support? And it's really not about that. We look for kids that have the interest in classic and collector cars and want to build a skill set that gets them into that industry. And so we're very much about, getting close to those scholars, getting to know who they are, helping them along their career path.
I said we were going to talk about you, Jeff. Now I want to dive right into the Piston Foundation. One of my bugaboos is people, especially like think pieces, even from pretty legit publications that are like, oh, car culture's dead with young people. And like, I would say that I don't think that's true at all. And I don't observe that in our world. And I think your mission kind of puts the lie to that a little bit, doesn't it? I mean, young people really are interested in cars.
They really are. And this is, something that got perpetuated. Look, it's been a long road and lots of things have created this situation. Technical education got taken out of high schools, 20 years ago. The shift to, the PC revolution, shifted, what it meant to be job ready, lots of things. And a lot of trades got swept under the rug in that change. And it's just the way things happen. But it really didn't change the fundamental interest that young people have. And I always say every generation falls in love with cars. Every American generation falls in love with cars. Right now, why it's different is because kids today are arriving to that career path differently than they did before. I'm of a generation that I call the toolbox kids. I had a toolbox. My brother had a toolbox. Every kid I knew in my neighborhood had a toolbox. And we took stuff apart and we grabbed stuff from junk day, old, Briggs and Stratton lawnmower engines. We made mini bikes. That's just what we did. And that's how we grew up. Kids don't have that same opportunity now. They may not have a garage to tinker in. They may not have, an uncle, an aunt, a brother who's into automotive or anything mechanical. And so when they think about this career, they're coming from a different spot. They're really coming from maybe media awareness. Maybe they've had a chance, in their local high school or their town to get some exposure. Maybe they just bought a, Nissan Maxima and started drifting, but when they arrive at the shop door, they don't have the same hand skills that the generation before them had. They need really, I firmly believe that if most of them need some kind of formal education, like an auto tech program, a 2-year program, to really get that stuff underneath and learn those skills, then they're ready to take that interest that they already have and turn it into a career. So people think kids aren't interested. I don't think that's true. I think it's really about access to the education and access to the training, and then access to the job opportunities. And those are the three places that Piston is pushing to make a change so that kids with an interest have access to the education they need to get started. They have access to training. They have access to job opportunities.
Did I hear you right in saying that kind of auto shops are dying? They're in a lot less high schools. Is that right? I mean, that was,
Oh,
I had
yeah.
a huge, I got a huge boost from our incredible auto shop program where I went to high school.
And that's shifting back. It's everything in culture swings left and swings right, and changes. I don't mean politically. I just mean it just changes. Right, technical education was a mainstay of high school. That changed. The PC revolution changed that. We rethought about what job readiness looked like, and at that time, job readiness meant you needed a computer lab in high school, and technical education, auto shop wasn't so important, and those dollars got shifted. And we've come
The dollars
back.
in my high school got shifted to a football stadium, which I found very frustrating as one of the auto shop nerds.
That too. Yeah, that happened as well. But locally, a lot of that is shifting, at least. So Piston is based in Greenwich, Connecticut. And in the state of Connecticut, we have an excellent technical high school system. There's 17 high schools with auto tech programs. I think I have that number right. And so locally and in certain places, there has been a reimagining of what technical education could be. And it's coming back in places where people are really have the drive to build it and bring it back. So it's not as ubiquitous as it once was, but there are lots of things happening around the country. So there's some places that are producing a lot of, future tradespeople through their high school programs. And, now they're a little more integrated with local employers. So they're actually even more effective than they ever were before.
I freaking love that. That gives me optimism. And I wonder, is that partly in conjunction with a kind of over the last, I don't know, maybe 15 years, it feels like there's been a push towards revitalizing the community college program. And I know a lot of the trades work gets done there. And I did eventually graduate from a university. My parents are thanking God for that. It took a little bit longer than most people. But some of my favorite moments as a young man, I'm 41 now, were when I went to community. I love community college. I'm a huge believer in it. If I wasn't working at BAT, I'd probably like to be a community college teacher.
Yeah.
So is the move in the high school space kind of in parallel with trying to feed more folks into, it's not really vocational training, it's trades worker training in community colleges?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's a little bit of cart and horse. I think the revitalization of community colleges started earlier than high school technical education, and high school technical education becomes a feeder into those college programs. And I can think of some places where those are very vertically connected, meaning, the high school students are getting those initial classes, and that's flowing right into the curriculum that they might see at their local community college that, together they built that path. I think there's another interesting thing that I saw happen, which was the maker movement. And the maker movement, putting a 3D printer on a table in an office, changed some things culturally and changed how we thought about who could be a maker. Because prior to that, certainly through the 90s and the 80s, being a maker wasn't a thing. It was be a money maker.
First time I heard the term. Yeah. It's
right? Be a money maker, not a
yeah.
And craft kind of came back when technology enabled that. And I think people got rethinking about, what have we lost here? And then that kind of spurred a lot of interest in looking back on some of the craft elements and the craftsman elements, not so much trade, right? But just sort of the craft, and thinking like, there was value in those things we used to make with our hands. How do we bring that back? And that was a very individual thing, Zen in the art of motorcycle repair and all of that, right?
Even I'm thinking of Mythbusters or Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec, right? Like people like that kind of stuff.
And then think about Motor Trend and all the resto shows and everything. All of that comes out of a fascination with building things with our hands. And I think humans are still instinctively built to do that. So all that stuff swirls around in the culture, but ultimately from the trade perspective, if there isn't a career path that is clear and bright and knowable and that kids can follow, all that the industry gets cut off at the knees. The workforce development gets cut off at the knees. And I think that's really what's happened. And our goal is to build a path that is bright and clear that young people can follow, and that it needs to be a different path than it was before. But that really will solve it.
Yeah, you're right at the nexus of that. I mean, the Piston's kind of some of the connective tissue right there. Is that part of the founding ethos of the charity?
Yeah, that's really it. That's really it. I mean, solely, we are really focused on just helping more kids become collector car technicians. And right now we always talk about technicians, but that's really not, it doesn't have to be that narrow, because the collector car space needs, people in sales and business operations and finance and marketing and events. So there's one of the things I love about this world, and people don't often talk about it, but I think it's certainly been part of my experience, is how entrepreneurial it is. I don't know a shop owner that didn't start as a technician. I know very few people in the industry that didn't start with some technical knowledge, or, don't wrench on their cars just a little bit.
Me right here. I was in automotive troubleshooting in high school, right? That's how I got into all of it. I wanted to work on cars instead of go to college, man.
Yep. So this is a thing about the trades. They are a starting point for a lot of possibilities in terms of where you can take it as a career. And so, it just totally blows apart all of that old stuff, that old grease monkey stuff, that old, down on blue collar jobs things, because in my experience, there is more upward mobility possible when you have a trade than if you have just a professional skill. Honestly, that's my personal opinion on it, in terms of how many different directions can I take that knowledge and build a career for myself, and, do something, start in a shop and then go start a parts company, start an event company, start a show, start a repair shop, start a business that sells, start a brand that does the coolest apparel for car people, start a shoe company. I mean, it's just endless.
Yeah. How about an auction company?
Start an auction company.
Our founder was wrenching on his Mustangs in high school.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I just don't see that. I've been in marketing for 25 years. That was my career prior to this. And I just don't see the same breadth of opportunity that those skills afford. And that's been my experience. So anyway, all of that stuff really excites me about what we're doing, and there's lots to talk about.
Totally. There's so much. And I want to get to our partnership with Piston, that is BAT and Piston, at some point. But very quickly, one thing I wanted to just kind of hone in on, you mentioned something about the innate human built-in component of either working with your hands or doing something. I distinctly remember as a guy in my early 20s driving around town and seeing cars that I'd fixed, and the satisfaction of, but for my manual labor, that wouldn't be driving around right now. That came in on a tow truck, and there it is. And I lived in a small town, and there's a satisfaction you get from that is, we've built BAT and I'm really proud of it, but it's not quite the same thing as, there's a lot of pride in building a successful business, but it is different when you see something that you kind of toiled on, that you maybe bled on sometimes, that you sweated underneath,
right.
The physical exertion that you put in is what created the result.
Yeah. There's a really great book, Shopcraft as Soulcraft, and just trying to look, actually doing a Google search while we talk, because I can't remember.
You want to give credit to the author, right, Jeff?
Yeah, I do, because I think it's a book that everybody should read. It's Matthew Crawford. Matthew Crawford is the author of Shop Class as Soulcraft. And it's a really great exploration of what it means to work with your hands and why there's value there. And it gets to that comment about, there's something innately human about making things with your hands, working with your hands. And I think I think we forgot about that for a couple of decades. I know I did. Even in my own personal history, there was a time where working with my hands was my full-time gig. And some days I dearly wish I could go back to that. I think.
You mean working on cars or doing graphic design? What was it? Or both?
Actually, so college didn't work out for me the first time, and I left after a couple of years, and I ended up running a bicycle shop in northwestern New Jersey, in a little town called Bedminster. And I was building custom racing bikes, and that's what we did. And that was great, and I learned how to do that. That had been kind of a passion of mine as a kid. My brother loved cars. I love bikes and was always building and riding and racing and all of that. But, in that time, I learned how to build wheels. and I learned how to build custom bikes from the ground up. And
Like welding the frames together and stuff, that kind of stuff?
Building on custom frames, like
Gotcha.
so
Okay.
working, directly with frame builders for customers to kind of get everything spec, but not doing the frame building myself, everything past that point. And I kind of wish if there was one thing I could go back and tell my younger self, like I wish I could go back and just like tell my 20-year-old self, like, hey, you know what? This has value that you can't see right now, but years from now, you're going to recognize it. And, I'd recommend you hold on to a bit of this,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
you still tinker with bikes, Jeff?
no, I've actually kind of given that up. I did for a long, long time. And then I kind of moved past it. I'm 56. So a couple years ago, I made the decision to give up riding and racing and mountain biking because I was like ever more
man, that's
afraid.
Tough on a very young man.
Yeah, I was ever more afraid. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to bust something. And then I'm going to be out for, weeks, months, years. I'm going to just shift. But no, I gave it all up. I started cross-country skiing instead. So that's mine.
You can screw yourself up doing that too, man.
And racing a rally car. So I traded mountain biking for rally racing. So
I want to get to that, but talk to me a little bit about the graphic design career and how that went. Would you always have an interest in art to kind of pair with your? I find that's often the case with folks who are interested in mechanical things. They have a artistic side. There is artistry to some of this work.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. No, it didn't happen like that at all. So I said college didn't work out. I worked in the shop for a few years. I ended up leaving New Jersey. I moved out here to Colorado and ended up working in the outdoor industry and worked for a company that was making outdoor equipment. And, sort of my natural instincts took over. I got involved in the production and prototyping. Kind of my hand skills led me to doing that stuff. And through that, the products we were creating needed packaging. And I just started sort of doing that and creating that stuff. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. I really like this design. I never thought about really sort of design on paper. And I was like, I got so enthralled with that. I started teaching myself, the process and all of that. And I realized like, wow, I could really do something with this. And I decided then to go back to school full-time at night at a 2-year technical college to get a degree in graphic design and learn just the mechanics. At that point, it was still ink on paper. So you really had to understand, print production and how all that happened and how you had to create a digital file to make that happen. There was still a little bit of voodoo in there.
And a real trade too. I mean, that's like an old school, hands-on trade.
Yep. And so I took those 2 years of technical school and turned it into a 25-year career as a self-employed designer and agency owner.
Amazing.
So when I talk to the kids that Piston works with, I know that path. I know the power of starting and finishing what they're doing, in that school, because I've lived through that. And I've always felt a real affinity for that process and, really a great affinity for the young people who are, taking that leap and trusting their instincts to do, following that interest. But knowing there's a real self-awareness when you say, I know I want to do this, but I know I need to go learn how to. And then pursuing that, with a lot of energy and a lot of dedication. That's what I see in the kids that we work with. And, that I think is a really cool thing. And I'm very personally motivated by that and really want to help those kids do that.
Of course. Hearing you speak, I think about the confidence that comes with, I have a teenager and a preteen child, and I think about the confidence that comes from completing something like a technical school and then what kind of a foundation that gives you to build on that success, and then the confidence that you might get that allows you to kind of branch out into other things. That's your journey, and presumably that's what you're looking to kind of instill in these kids who you're helping or who the foundation is helping.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that does happen. There's a really interesting, I'll come back to that Soulcraft book. There's a really interesting point that the author makes about the difference between a crew and a team. In years past, when people were working in the trades, working, manual or just manual labor jobs, doing jobs with your hands, that work is structured in crews. And if you're on a house building crew, it really doesn't matter who you are, what you believe. What matters is the wall you built plumb and is it true? And if it is, you've met very objective criteria for the quality of your work. And all the work you're doing has this very objective set of criteria to judge it by. Today, in an office environment, when we're working on teams, and let's say we're a marketing team and there's a writer who writes and there's a programmer who programs and a designer who designs, none of that work has an objective criteria for its correctness. And that, I think, some people can deal with that well. Not everybody deals with that well. And so when we in our lives have things that give us like an objective set of rules, like just fixing the plumbing in your own home, right? You're fixing a leaking toilet and you fix it. There's a great sense of pride that we as homeowners have, right? And it really comes from that. And I think we've forgotten this, but it really comes from it either works or it doesn't.
Yeah.
It leaks or it doesn't. That's objective. But if I go to work and, I'm managing people, everything becomes a little grayer. And so I have fewer opportunities in my professional life to actually feel like that sense of ownership and pride and completeness in the work that I do. And I think the trades give that. I think, craft
Be careful,
work,
Jeff. You're getting a little too close to why it's hard to run BAT, man. Like, don't discourage our staffers dealing with customers all day long. No, I take your point, though. I mean, you're exactly right. You're speaking truth, man.
Yeah. So anyway, this is, I think, when you start to unpack a lot of this stuff, you get well past the sort of economics and the industry and all of that. But, none of that theory really makes a new tradesperson. So I think we can always roll it back to, look, we got to support the education and training and job opportunities for young people to get into the trades of all trades, but I'm focused on the collector car industry so that this community can continue to thrive, right? We need those people to allow everybody else to enjoy the hobby, enjoy their vehicles, and keep it all rolling.
1,000%. I can't remember who I was talking to about it. Oh, it was Cam Ingram from Road Scholars. They, restore old Porsches. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. And we were talking about Furman 4-cam, air-cooled motors. And I'm like, how many people left can rebuild those? And what happens when those guys die? That's like a real problem,
Yeah.
Interesting thing to think about.
Well, it's a very cool piece of engineering. And there's a few people in the country now that have made a business out of specializing in that. And, it comes back to like, there's so much opportunity to do things like that. I think, is it Kelly Rebuilds? The young girl who started rebuilding Holly carburetors and
I'm not familiar
made a business
with that.
out of that.
Plug her. That sounds fantastic. Like vintage Hollies, is that the idea?
Vintage and new, and I think it's Kelly Rebuilds. I think that's what it is. It's just a simple way to specialize in something, and you can build a business around it or build 100%. A career around it, and then you've got your start, and where you go from there.
Yeah, if you've got your Spica alpha injection, you got to go to Wes Ingram, right? Like that's like that guy's got to have it.
Yeah,
got to send it to him to make it work.
That's right.
Yeah, you're right. There's a absolute huge amount of opportunity for that, and it is always encouraging to me when I go to events or when I meet people who are young. Even I'm 41, younger than me, who are working on these things and wrenching on old cars. I have a couple pre-war weirdo cars that there's literally like one place left to work on them. And that guy's not young. And so I'm like, what happens? Is that car like, do I have to throw it in the dumpster or figure out how to fix it myself? I don't want to fix it myself. So,
there aren't enough museums in the world to take all those cars. End up as yard art.
Yep. That's exactly right. Yeah. So how does your path lead you to Piston, Jeff?
So my brother had a very typical midlife crisis, and when he turned 50,
this is the car guy, the guy who's into cars.
Yeah, he's always been into cars. He decided.
What model Ferrari did he buy, or what model?
No, it's not even that predictable, to his credit. So when he turned 50, he called me and said, "Hey, a friend recommended. I was talking to a friend about rally racing, and I was thinking about getting into it. And originally he's thinking about like time, speed, distance rallies and regularity rally and that. And he said, well, my friend said, if there's one rally I ought to do, in my life, it ought to be the Carrera Panamericana. And I'm thinking about running it. And would you like to be my co-driver?" So this was like back in 2016. And I thought, wow, you've really gone far with this idea. Because the last time we talked about, it wasn't racing, it was just, rallying. And I said, well, give me a day to think about it. So I looked up, Carrera Panamericana. I'd never heard about it. I read all about it. I'm like, okay, this is serious stuff.
Was he
So I
talking
called
about
him.
like these Studebakers and stuff, like trying to go for
Yeah.
the outright speed win? Some of these like 200 mile an hour tube frame 50s cars. Wow.
Yep, that's exactly it. That's the one and only. And so I called him back. I was like, yeah, okay, I'm in, but I think we're going to need to do some training. And so that pulled me back into the car world. And then the guy we have to blame for all of that is a guy named Kent Bain, who founded Automotive Restorations, Inc. in Stratford, Connecticut. And he's to blame for putting that idea in my brother's head. My brother had bought a very nice 65 MGB that he was going to, rally with his wife, and they were going to do, maybe the great race or something. And Kent is the one who said, and it was of course, because so ARI, they have a race shop called Vintage Racing Services that actually does all our rally cars now. VRS, Vintage Racing Services, had specialized in getting teams to the Carrera. When the Carrera came back in 1988, they started bringing teams down there and preparing Carrera cars. They're one of a handful of shops in the US that really know how to build a Carrera car. So, of course, Ken was like, trying to look for another customer, but honestly saying, hey, if you really want to rally, this is a cool thing. And so Kent, this is the long way around the corner. Kent was already connected with the Piston Foundation. And so Kent was not only the reason that, we're rally racing today, but he's also the reason that I became a part of Piston. And, we started volunteering, and that was about 4 or 5 years ago. It just grew from there.
Snowballed, I would say.
But, cars.
Did you guys run the MGB? Is that what you ran in the Carrera?
No. We built a car. We bought a 65 Volvo Amazon 122S that had already run the race once. And we developed that car for a couple of years and then took it to the Carrera for the first time in 2018.
Still a 4-cylinder?
4-cylinder B20. Yep. In that race, the Carrera Panamericana is a 7-day race. It races city to city from the south to the north, usually about 2,500 miles over 7 days. And it's got classes by displacement. And so there's a few historic elements that have to be maintained, displacement and the engine block being one of them. But everything else can be upgraded. All the safety systems can be upgraded. So we're running a B20 that is just kind of rally tuned, but everything else, lots of work on the suspension. Everything is, rod ends and all kinds of
duplicative, right? We've listed quite a few Panamericana cars, and shout out to our buddy Mike, if he's listening. I don't know if he is, who we ran the Copper State with a couple of years ago, and he bought a Studebaker Commander that had run in the locker, and he runs it on like regular, like the Copper State 1000, regular road rallies. And I think he has to climb through the windows and everything.
Yep.
And what I remember from looking at his car and some of these other ones we've listed are like the beefiest cages I've ever seen. And then a lot of, it's almost like an aircraft, a lot of redundant systems, like 2 fuel pumps. I don't know if those are spare parts or in case one fails or how that works.
No, it really is about redundancy. So there's lots of things that you have to build in. Double fuel pumps are one. Ignition coils are another that we double up on.
And you got to try to pack some spare wheels. You're carrying a bunch of spare wheels if you can, right?
Yeah, you have a spare. So we have a crew that supports the car because, you're doing probably over the 7 days, you're racing probably about 500, 550 miles a day. It varies. It gets bigger at the end, the days. The cars are serviced at night, serviced in the middle of the day. A day is a stage broken into sections. Some of those sections are transit. So you're transiting on open public roads, and then you're racing on closed mountain roads typically. And so the speeds are high throughout the whole thing, and it's very demanding on the cars. So you have to preserve the car, and the cars are built with lots of particulars around both dealing with heat, which is always a factor there. There's a lot of stopping and starting. It's not like a race car that, runs 20 minutes continuously and then's off the track. A rally car has to run in traffic, in high heat situations all the time, all day long. And then suspension and all of that. There's The roads are decent, but there's lots of speed bumps and all kinds of things that you have to get yourself through. So they become a very unique animal. A Carrera Panamericana car is a very unique animal.
They're so freaking cool. Everyone I've seen is cool. Many years ago at an event we had, I think it was Taz Harvey's car. It was a Alpha sedan.
Yeah.
Which I think he won his class in. What that would have been probably the class you ran in, small bore.
Yeah, probably that's historic A or historic A plus. Yep. Which is,
but to win overall, you've got to have one of these Studebakers, right? Or like we many years ago, we had like a 1940 LaSalle that was all built. I mean, like really interesting cars. They would have had to be period cars that could have run in period. Is that right?
Yeah. So there's different classes. The top class, Turismo Mayor, is ultimately they are NASCAR cars. They're tubular framed, 650 horsepower, naturally aspirated NASCAR race cars with a fiberglass body that looks like a Studebaker Commander, or I forget the other one. Anyway, that's the top class. And, they finish the race with an average speed of near 80 miles an hour. So 2,500 miles all in, about 80 miles an hour, which means their top speeds on stage are, 130 to 150 on closed mountain roads. So they are serious pieces of kit. And then the classes go down from there. Obviously, there's a huge Porsche contingent at the 911 RS level, and then also 911s and 912s, given, the history of Porsche at the race. So
Carrera's at the Carrera.
That's right.
What a thing. How many times have you run it?
We have raced it 3 times. We have gotten ourselves 6 stage wins in our class and 2 class podiums. We've also, our team is called Driving La Carrera, and we've made now 4 films about the race, about our own race and other teams. So shameless plug, you can go to Driving La Carrera, drivinglacarrera.com, or just search at Driving La Carrera on YouTube or any of the socials, and you'll find our stuff.
I know what I'm doing tonight, Jeff. That's awesome. Yeah, I love La Carrera content.
Yeah.
You've done some other rally racing, have you not?
Yeah, we've started branching out from there. That was the origin. But this past summer, this summer, Chris and I, my brother Chris, who's the driver, I'm the navigator, we ran the Mille Miglia for the first time, which was great fun. So our rally car,
I was going to say, not in a Volvo. I don't think they let that in.
The Volvo, the rally car, that car is called the Mescalero. So the Mescalero is our kind of US-based rally car. And we took that down to the USA warm-up, the Mille Miglia USA warm-up last November, and did really well there and won ourselves a guaranteed entry into the 2024 Mille. So we took advantage of that and raced a 1939 Fiat Balilla, which is, it's a 2-door sedan with suicide doors at the back. If you can sort of imagine the shape of like a Topolino, it's kind of like a grown-up one, very like.
Is it a different chassis rounded underneath, or is it a Topolino underneath?
No, different chassis, but it's just sort of that rounded shape. Yeah. And a very, very common car in Italy. And with also a lot of rally history. Yeah, so we ran that and did pretty well. It's a tough race. It's a grueling race. Its challenges are not speed or navigation, really just pure endurance. But it was fun. It was beautiful. We had a great time. And of course, we're making a film about it. So
awesome. Oh, I can't wait to see that. I mean, calling that grueling after running a couple La Carreras is interesting. I was going to say, you said the La Carrera takes a toll on the cars, and it must take a toll on the people too.
Oh yeah. That race is really, really difficult. You really have the key to the Carrera for anybody that wants to run it is you have to manage the car. You have to manage yourself because, you can kind of tour it. It's still a lot of work. But if you're going to race it, there's risk. And just like any racing, the thing about the Carrera is you've probably never driven that road before. You have no idea what's around that corner. And, stuff happens. So the stress of the Carrera is dealing, with all the things that are happening. The navigation is more difficult. Racing at speed is more difficult. All the unknowns, you've got to transit. That's, the transits on the open roads are the most dangerous, most stressful part of it. On the Mille, really the difficulty is the hours in the car. I mean, we'd had like 15, 16-hour days in the car. And while the navigation is dead simple, the time trial tests are challenging and require a lot of focus and attention. Getting to the next checkpoint requires a lot of focus and attention to get yourself through all the traffic. But doing that for 16 hours a day on the longest days, that's what makes it grueling. And that's really where the challenge lies. The maintaining that consistent accuracy in time for that duration, that's really the challenge. So
it's exhausting just hearing you talk about it, man.
It's fun though.
I'm sure. Plus you get to be in Italy. That's not bad.
Yeah, that's not bad either. Yeah.
Hopefully you carved out a little time to hang out there when you're not spending 16 hours in a car. What about street driving? You interested in cool street cars too?
A little bit, but not as much. My really kind of all of my car energy goes into rally racing. And I've got a very boring kind of daily driver, but we've got cool race cars. So I mentioned that MGB, there's that. We're going to turn that. We have an entry into the Great Race that we put off this year because the Melee popped up. So we very much are looking forward to doing that race in that MGB. So we're going to develop that for that race. And then we're really hoping to do the Monte Carlo Historic. So we've got a 65 Fulvia,
awesome.
1.3 that we just started the first stages of preparing that car for rally in Europe. And
already kind of a competition car, or are you building it out of a street car?
No, it's a survivor. And so we're starting, from zero with that car.
Man, those cars are so pretty. You're going to love driving that thing.
I know. It's such a great touring experience. It's sort of like, that and a BMW 2002 they're both like
lots of greenhouse.
Yeah. Yes, totally. But really nice. So we're really looking forward to that. So kind of all my car energy goes into those things.
Totally fine. Have you guys floated Peking to Paris? Has that been discussed?
Yeah, we would really love to do that. And doing it in a Fangio car would be just the perfect. So we have some friends that have done it and we talk about it. I think someday it will happen for sure. Yeah.
Good. I'll be watching the vids. I'll be watching for it, Jeff.
Yeah, that's totally our style.
I would be remiss if I didn't bring things back around to Piston, since that's what we're here to talk about, but also about your relationship with BaT. So I've been involved with some of this behind the scenes, but I don't want to tell the story. Talk a little bit about how that collaboration started, and we've done some big stuff. So I'd like to highlight some of the watershed moments of the Bring a Trailer Piston Foundation partnership. But how did it all get started?
Well, it's a great partnership. We absolutely love working with BaT. The BaT community is just our people, right? We're just all in that same car community. We're just all have that shared passion. And it really began with Randy Nonnenberg. He contacted us saying, hey, we want to auction off the 240Z, the Gimlet Z, and we want to do it for a charity. And, we're considering you. And so we had some really great initial conversations to share what we were working on. And that really resonated with Randy and the BaT team. And they chose us as the beneficiary. And that was really the starting point of our relationship with Bring a Trailer. And since then, we've had several more car auctions and a couple automobilia auctions. And we had our recent t-shirt collaboration, which was a huge success. So for us, based on that beginning point, we've just leaned in every way we can to be a part of the Bring a Trailer community.
Well, the community loves you guys too, obviously, because of your mission. It's a very sympathetic cause to our folks, but I agree that our ethos aligns too. For listeners, in case you don't know, the 240Z that Jeff is talking about was our 100,000th auction. So that was like a big, maybe the milestone for us. And we listed a car that I drove thousands of miles in. It was a great freaking car. I used that car a lot. That car went on some big rallies too and drove across the country. It did a lot of big stuff and had a monster Rebello motor. And it might be the best sounding car I've ever driven up at high RPM. But super cool car, raised a ton of money. And our community is always asking Jeff, we do charity auctions quite a bit, but they're always like, how can we do more? How can we really like this cause? How can we give more? And so we try to add a link in listings, but we also have a little box down at the bottom so folks can give charitably. And you said you got quite a few donations on that auction outside of the car itself. Is that right?
Yeah, there was a great response from the community as a whole. Certainly, the winning bidder, put it in the stratosphere for a 240Z. And, Those dollars went into our scholarship fund. And then we had several thousand more dollars that came through, probably about 50 or 60 additional donations from the community during that auction. And so that was terrific. And together during that time period, I think the auction itself generated enough funds for 23 scholarships.
Yes. Yeah, we did some coverage on that. I was hoping you could talk about some of the downstream effects. I don't know if you have real life, cases of how these kinds of donations can help.
Yeah. Well, so in that auction, we had 100% of those dollars went into our scholarship fund. And so that netted 23 scholarships for 2023. No magic in that number. It just was coincidence. But, and those kids were at schools across the country. A good number were at McPherson College. Some were at Lanier Technical College in Gainesville, Georgia. Also Northwestern Ohio, Penn Tech. And these were all kids that are, interested in classic cars, car restoration, resto mods, getting into the industry as a technician. And, they were at the school of their choice, taking their first steps. And we were there to support them with scholarships that really enable them, in some cases, to be at school at all, because those dollars are the difference between being there or not being there. In other cases, those dollars allowed students to work less during the school year and focus more on their studies. And so many times in scholarships, people kind of conceive that it has to be like a binary thing, like either the scholarship makes it possible or not. And that's the only point of value. And we hear from time and time again from our scholars that the scholarship you gave me allowed me to do more in the classroom, do more in the lab, really focus more time on my projects. And ultimately, that's where the skills are built. It's not just being there, it's the doing. And so, that's a real huge impact that the BAT community has had on 23 young people, giving them the capacity to be at school as well as really make the most of that opportunity. And so far, Piston as a whole, over all of our scholarship periods, we're only in our fourth year, which people say, wow, you guys have been around a long time. No, it just kind of sounds old, but this is actually just our fourth year. And we've awarded this year just our third round of scholarships. All told, we've awarded 50 scholarships over the past 2.5 years. Those went to 37 students, and 10 of those students have now graduated from their programs and are now working in the industry.
Amazing.
That's the pipeline.
I mean, it's fantastic. How do you identify folks? How do you figure out who you're going to award these scholarships to?
Yeah, so we have a scholarship process that starts online, and it's pretty rigorous. And we ask a fair bit of our applicants in terms of an online application, a personal statement, references, a video presentation about their interest. And through those, we're able to assess, how committed they are. The process, requires work, and even the process itself kind of takes some people out of it, right? Like, yeah. But if you've made it to the end, you've got some determination and you really want to do this. And so we have a scholarship committee, which is made up of, car enthusiasts within our organization, people from our local community who kind of assess those candidates based on their submissions. And then, we award the number of scholarships that we can, right? Basically, we're kind of exhaust our scholarship fund every time. In fact, in this most recent scholarship period, we came up a little short. We had more qualified candidates than we could actually fund. And so it's part of, growing as an organization to build the capacity to fund all the scholarships that you find qualified candidates for. And this year we couldn't. We had probably another 10 scholars that we had to say, okay, we'll defer your application to the next round when we have new funding. And so that's, a place where the car community can have a real impact, knowing that their donations, their giving really is going straight towards those scholarships, and that more than likely there's a student waiting for that opportunity, and that their giving enables it in a very direct way.
I think that's really important for our community to know. And I'm constantly blown away by our community for their knowledge, for their passion, for their dedication, but also for their sense of doing the right thing and wanting to make sure people have opportunities in this industry. And, in this kind of, they're nuts about cars. They like other people who are nuts about cars and they want to give back. And I know they care about motivating young people and getting them excited about the hobby and about the industry that surrounds it. How can Piston be a conduit for collectors in terms of folks who want to give back to this community? Like, how does Piston really help folks who are interested in the car world, how they can really give back and leave a legacy via Piston?
Yeah, for collectors who are at a point where they're thinking about, what their legacy might be, or they've got a collection and they're, starting to wind it down a little bit, and they're thinking about, where are these cars going to go when I'm, not driving them anymore? We hope that they'll consider Piston as, an outlet for those vehicles. We, with Bring a Trailer, started this Cars for Piston Scholars program. And that is our program which accepts donated classic cars that are auction ready. And then we run those auctions and take those funds and put them into our scholarship program. And then, out the other side come, new talent into the industry. And so for collectors who have a collection that they're kind of thinking about winding down, we would love to have those conversations with them and to see if we fit their priorities, their giving priorities for their estate. Or some collectors, there's always that black sheep in there, that one that doesn't fit anymore within the vision of the collection. And so, if someone has the capacity to give a vehicle to the Piston Foundation, we'd love to have those conversations with them. It is just a very direct path from them to those funds coming back into the community in the form of new talent that's getting an opportunity to begin a career.
I mean, we love it too. And just so folks know, maybe they're already aware of this, we don't make any money off these. We give all of our fees. Everything goes right back to the Piston. We do that with all of our charity auctions. It's like, we're not doing it to make money. We're doing it to help the cause. We only run these kinds of auctions for causes that we believe in. And again, Pistons, they're our primary beneficiary of this stuff. We love working with you guys. So,
well, thanks to you guys for that. And we try to emphasize that in all of the auctions that we do, whether it's a car, whether it's automobilia. We had a super cool collection of die-cast cars that was up earlier this year. We love that. That was so cool. But, the fact that Bring a Trailer donates the buyer's fee directly to Piston as well is a hugely generous gift that you guys give us, because not only does your staff help us put on the auction, which is, there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, but you guys also donate those proceeds back to the scholarship fund. So thanks to you guys, and thanks to Randy and Howard and everybody who, chose to run charity auctions that way, because it really is a very significant kicker to the performance of, the success of an auction, to have those monies come in. And it really speaks so highly of you guys and what your true commitment to the community is. It really shows up in moments like that.
Well, so your organization makes it easy because it's something easy for all of us, car nuts to believe in, right? It's kind of like the cause that we were looking for many years, right? Because that's what people always want to do. They want to put money right back into the hobby that they love, right? And so that's why I was excited to have this conversation. We've got some exciting stuff coming up too. Like we've got a couple interesting things. You want to do some plugs? You should absolutely plug whatever's coming up for Piston in general, but also maybe you could plug what Piston and BAT are going to be up to in the very near future.
Yeah. So folks might have seen the t-shirt collaboration that we did, I think 2 weeks ago now. And that was sort of a first round of what will be an ongoing collaboration with Bring a Trailer and Piston to create a very cool fundraiser centered around custom t-shirts that have a message that speaks to our shared mission of keeping these cars on the road and keeping folks engaged and building the skills of the people who can take care of them. So that's going to continue off onto the future. I think our next round of t-shirts will arrive in early spring. Those designs are already kind of in the oven baking, so people have that to look forward to. And we've got the New York Alumni Gathering that's coming up. And there's an unconfirmed rumor that the current batch of t-shirts might be available there.
And maybe that you will even be floating around, Jeff, allegedly.
Yes, I will be there. So Piston will be there in force with our team. And I think our board of directors will be there as well. So we would love to talk to everybody that we can at the Alumni Gathering. It's actually the first one we've been able to attend. We've been trying for throughout the year to sort of line things up. And of course, that one is in our own backyard. with our own friends, 1600 Veloce. So we can't miss it. So we will be there. If you see us, please come say hi. And at the very least, you can get a Piston sticker and, slap it on your car.
Awesome. I'm fired up for that. We're fired up for that event in general, and working with 1600 Veloce on it has been awesome, but really excited to have Piston Foundation there. What else should folks know about, Jeff?
Well, I think, if they want to support the foundation, it's very easy. They can go to pistonfoundation.org. And there's a couple things that they can do there. We have a sweepstakes going on for a very, very cool Porsche GTS. They could get involved in that. And those funds go to sort of our general operating funds, but they get a chance to help kids get into the trade and a chance to win a very cool Porsche. They can donate to our scholarship fund just straight up at whatever level it fits them. And that, again, goes straight back into the community in the form of scholarships. If you want to volunteer for the Piston Foundation, you can do that as well. There's a volunteer page and a form, and we're doing more and more events every year. So there's more and more opportunities to be at places like Lime Rock Park or Caffeine and Carburetors in New Canaan, Connecticut, or at a BAT alumni gathering, and be part of the Piston team. And then finally, like our partnership with Bring a Trailer, we are very interested in cultivating partnerships with businesses within the industry. And so if you are a business owner that wants to be a partner with the Piston Foundation, there's a way for you to kind of raise your hand, let us know who you are and that you want to do that. And we've got some other really key partnerships that we've started this year with brands like Petrolicious, as well as Car and Driver and Road and Track. And all of those are, very generous businesses that are very committed to the community. And, if you're a business owner and want to join that group, we welcome a conversation to see if there's a fit for that.
Awesome. We really appreciate you being on, Jeff. Anything else? Any parting shots?
Well, thanks, Alex, for having me on. This has been great. We wanted to do this podcast for a while, and we listened to all the episodes. So it's like our way to keep our finger on the heart of the community. I think we should just all remember that the kids are interested, and if we want this community to thrive, we've got to all take it on ourselves to do a little bit of something, do the thing that we can do to give these kids a path into the industry so that, the car community as a whole can thrive. This community is very generous, always has been. I'm sure it always will be. And maybe this is a time where we have to realize that, this workforce development cause, getting the people who keep these cars on the road, getting that workforce from graying to growing, right? That's the very simple thing, right? Because we all know it's graying. We realize, now that, okay, maybe that's the place where we need to put our effort a bit at this point in time to ensure that the future is bright for the hobby. So I think that's my parting thought. It's something that we can all do to the capacity that we have.
Incredibly well said. I think that's the best place we could possibly leave it.
Terrific.
Great conversation, Jeff. Thanks again for being here. We covered a lot of ground. Maybe we need a full deep dive episode on the Carrera Panamericana. I feel like I could talk about that all day long. Hopefully that didn't get us too far afield, but it's a fascinating subject. Yeah. Thanks for being here, man.
Thanks, Alex.
And thanks everyone for listening. Please don't hesitate to reach out to podcast@bringatrailer.com with feedback, questions, concerns. We want to hear from you, and we will catch you next time.